All right, so let's talk lesson. To me, the lesson in all of this is understanding the difference between religion and faith. And for me, growing up, I was in church because I was in a K through 8 school. So that was Catholic. So every Wednesday we had church. And then on Sundays, most Sundays we went to church. And then once I was in 3rd or 4th grade, I started being an altar server. So I was in church most of that time. Pro tip, by the way, if you are an altar server or have kids that are an altar server, always opt to do the Christmas Eve Mass instead of the Christmas Day Mass and the early Christmas Eve Mass. So you're done and out of there. You're done with church by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and you don't have to sweat it. You can wake up on Christmas morning and enjoy the whole day. So there you go. Parenting hack, extra, just the tip, and we haven't even gotten to that yet. But for me, growing up, that was just part of the life. And again, my family we were in it, but we weren't crazy into it. It wasn't like, kind of an overwhelming or a burdensome sort of approach. But I always found a lot of it kind of peculiar because I was confused as a kid about the kind of the rules, the regulations, all the prayers, the singing, the standing up, the sitting down. And I know all of that is steeped in ritual and tradition and everything, but I always found all of that stuff kind of silly. And I'm not trying to talk bad about anybody that enjoys that part of it, but to me, that seemed to be not the part that I was in church for. And I kind of always had the understanding that, hey, if I'm going to church, it's kind of like to pray. It's kind of to be there with my thoughts and kind of to have a place where I can kind of focus in on that kind of stuff. Even as a kid, even though, I didn't know what I was doing or saying or whatever. But it always kind of struck me as odd that there was so much formality and rigidity and kind of regulation towards the process. And it kind of always made me think like, okay, if I'm back in when Jesus was walking around hanging out with his 12 buddies, it seemed like they probably had way more conversations and way more just kind of, metaphorical, let's sit around and have a beer and just talk about stuff and listen and that kind of thing, as opposed to this, formality, this rigid process. And that was kind of one of the things that bothered me about the story that I was telling, both stories about the baptism and about our trying to get married, was that I feel like you go back to when Jesus was around and present him with this option, the answer is probably going to be a yes, right? Because we know what the intentions are and all of that. So that kind of rigidity always struck me as odd and weird. But that was kind of what I just sort of was like, okay, cool. And then I went to college and went to Catholic college, St. Norbert College, the Green Knights. Wonderful experience in college, and it was a Catholic college. And it was the first time I had been to a Catholic church that wasn't set up the exact same way. And this one had the altar in the center, and then it had all the seating around it. And I can't remember what they called it or whatever, but the whole reason was that it was kind of a more of a community vibe and less, the leadership up there and the people down here listening. It was more of kind of a inclusive and community sort of centric ceremony or church or mass or whatever it's called. And I remember thinking like, okay, that was pretty cool. And that was like the St. Norbert was pretty proud that like they were doing something that was, like really pushing the boundaries of the Catholic Church because they had the altar in the center instead of in its traditional place. But I remember just that in and of itself kind of made me feel more like, yeah, that seems a little bit more modern or a little bit more kind of how we would interpret that in today's world as opposed to 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago or whatever. And then next to the church, or kind of adjacent to it, they had this really cool room. I don't even remember what it was called, but it was like a giant prayer room, but it had all these glassed-in ceiling tiles, and it was kind of just like a quiet room. And I remember always wanting to go there instead of going to church. And I'm going somewhere with this. This isn't a religion thing, but I always gravitated towards that place because what I've learned to determine was that I was kind of leaning more towards the faith side of it and less towards the religion side of it. And the standing up, the sitting down, the singing, I do not sing, and I do not sing in church, and I got yelled at so many times in school, and like, don't make me sing. Like, do not make me sing. But the singing, the standing up, the sitting down, everybody saying the same prayer at the same time, that was it, just whatever. But kind of going off on my own and just sort of being alone with my thoughts. And if I was inclined to pray, praying in the way that I would talk to a higher power, talk to Jesus or God or whatever. And that was sort of the way that I gravitated towards that. And I kind of realized years on that, yeah, the religion thing is less important to me than the faith thing. And I know that they go hand in hand, but you don't have to be an investigator to take a look at what, sort of scrutiny the Catholic Church has been under for the last X amount of years with some less than admirable practices and cover-ups and all that kind of thing. But to me, I think the lesson in this for me was that sort of helped me understand that there is a difference between religion and faith. And ideally, they can be two sides of the same coin, but a lot of times they can be competing against each other. And I think that is a very important lesson to learn as an adult or even as a young adult. And not that you have to shun one or the other, but understanding that one is faith, one is religion, one is pure, one started out as pure, but maybe isn't so pure anymore. And practicing your faith doesn't require weekly or monthly donations or for you to stand up or sit down, but practicing religion does.